Hey, Daddy, this is the man of the champions, Bill Fonzie Alfonso, giving a shout out to
Something else.
something else, Daddy.
This is Nicole Matara, Great Warrior Wolf, and you are listening to Something Else.
I'm Tony Cini, and you're listening to something else.
Hey everybody, it's Rich Palladino, the voice of New England, and you are listening to Something Else with Aria.
And welcome to episode number 172 of Something Else. Feast your ear holes on this week's episode as we take a look at NWA Total Nonstop Action, episode number 35 from March 5th, 2003. My name is Aria, and joining me, as always, is the Disgraceland to my hotshots, is Cindy. Cindy, how the heck are you today?
It'd be a lot better if Zoom would work for me.
Oh, Zoom. At least it's not Skype. Skype's going out of business in like a month or something like that. So
I have to start
Yay,
recording
we-
these over Discord.
well, or Microsoft Teams. That apparently also is one that's sticking around. But at least for now, I'm happy to stick it out with good old Zoom. All right. So as I'm sure anybody who's listened to this show the last month has noticed, I hate this show. I hate TNA. And to be perfectly honest, if my long-term plan wasn't to take all of these reviews and slap them into a giant ebook when I was done, I would cut bait and run and, never look back at this shit show ever again. So here's part of the problem. So this is not a 2-hour TV show. A 2-hour TV show has a crap ton of commercials in it. So you're getting about an hour and 22 to an hour and 24 minutes of show. This show, there's no commercials, and there's no, I mean, I could fast forward during like video packages, but it's more of a pain in the ass than it's worth because you end up fast forwarding too far and having to rewind, etc. But anyway, my point is, this show most weeks is about an hour and 55 minutes. Now, this week's an hour 45 minutes. Who knows why, but, thank whomever for our blessings this week.
Mother
Anyway.
Nature.
Anyway, so this show typically takes me an hour and 55 minutes to watch. Mid-South, World Class, Smoky Mountain. 3 shows that I love. And it's not just because, Trey and I talk about whatever garbage comes to our head over, those couple shows that we do each week. It's because those are 3 really good shows, and we're in the middle of, if not the peak of all 3 promotions, we're approaching the peak of all 3 promotions. Now, in 2 years, when World Class is dragging out Lance Von Erich and Smoky Mountain is in its last 10 episodes where it falls off a cliff, I'm probably going to be a little upset watching those shows too. However, at the moment, watching those 3 shows takes me, give or take, about 2 hours and 10 minutes. And I don't have to watch it as 2 hours and 10 consecutive minutes of my life like I do with this show, where, let's be honest, yes, I could press pause halfway through and go do something else with my life and come back to it. But to be honest, that would make it worse because then I'd have to come back and watch more TNA. So, whatchamacallit? I guess my point is, it's like, this show is too goddamn long, especially with commercials, almost the equivalent of a 3-hour, TV show. Because like 3 hours of SmackDown, or when Raw was 3 hours, that's like what, 2 hours and 6 minutes of content?
Yeah.
If you take out all the commercials, while this is about an hour and 55 minutes, and I can't watch fucking SmackDown. I watched 7 minutes of it a couple weeks ago, and I turned it off. It was that episode where Cody was supposed to be in a six-man tag, and he got informed that The Rock was taking him out of it so he could talk to him at the end of the show. You know, I gave up very shortly after that. Um, this show, I developed a new rule because Mid-South World Class, Smoky Mountain, I make liberal use of my pause button. So if there's any time I need to take extra notes, I press pause, type out whatever I need to type out, and then unpause it and move on. This show, I've developed a new rule, and we're going to keep going with it because it makes my life slightly easier. I press play, and if they give me way too much shit, more than I can write down in a segment, that's on them. I am not pressing pause. I am not stopping unless I need to go take a piss. And even then, if I can get away with it, I'd rather just keep playing. But I'm going to press play, and 1 hour and 55 minutes later, it's going to be over. Not a second more than I have to spend my life caring about this goddamn show. Then I'll come on here, talk to you about having to watch David Flair in main events, and we'll move on with our lives.
I'm going to tell you right now, if you think this is the low point, wait.
Oh, at this point, I don't even care. I'm I'm so done. I'm so over this company. And, you know, the TNA that exists today is not the 2003 TNA. These are two insanely different companies, and it's impossible to believe that it's the same company from 20 years ago, you know? Because like we replaced the bad TNA with a good TNA. It just took us a really long ass time to get to a good TNA. And Cindy, I'm gonna cut you off right now. We are not going to be watching this show for the next 16 years so we can get to the good TNA.
All we got to do is just wait 1 year and then we get to when they start Impact.
Don't get me started because you still want to double dose for those few months. Anyway, so
Because those shows are good.
Yes, but what were you going to say about the next few weeks or few months or whatever?
Uh, this is an interesting time, but I will say once you think somebody's coming in, the show falls off a cliff.
So let's dive in here because we're never going to end if we don't start. This week in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, you remember how Vince Russo comes out here every week and talks about how, bro, the place is sold out, bro, every week. And we point out that, bro, that's because they give away, 90% free tickets. Well, TNA notices that too, and they've made a decision that in the next few weeks they're going to stop giving away as many free tickets and try to entice people to actually pay to come into the shows. It's a very novel concept, except most people generally accept the fact that it's more important to have a full house for TV than it is to make, $10 off 1,000 people. And so they're not expecting it to really make a difference. There's also talk about offering Christopher Daniels a long-term deal with a pay bump to convince him to scale back his Japanese commitments and make TNA his primary home, which is wacky since a company that only runs one show a week. But anyway, Daniels, they're worried, is also going to be offered a WWE developmental deal because he was the star of the recent Ohio Valley tryout camp. Spoiler alert, he's not going to WWE. Whether or not he actually gets offered a contract, that I'm not sure of, but he's not going to WWE. But I think most of us actually know that.
Yeah.
Anywho, on to the show. So the highlight of these shows the last few weeks has been the 5-minute opening video package recapping stuff because just because it's not new crap. It's old crap, so it's 5 minutes we can take off the show. Unfortunately, there was no 5 minute video package this week to open the show. So we're getting the full 1 hour, 45 minute show here this week. They announced that Amazing Red will be getting a shot at the X Division title, making him the most recent person not named Jerry Lynn to get an X Division title match since Jerry Lynn won that number one contenders match. And also, it continues the tradition of somebody getting an X Division title match when the last match they had was a loss, with Red's last match being back on February 5th against Sonny Siaki. See, I told you need to lose matches to get title shots around here.
Then why doesn't David Young get a world title match every week?
Well, he had a 2 match winning streak a few weeks ago, so he's got a long way to go before he can start earning his world title matches by losing. So, anywho, Raven is sitting in the balcony to cut a promo where he quoted some song lyrics. I thought he was just posting Facebook posts for me at this point. Raven told Sandman that he will win their Raven's Clockwork Orange House of Fun match. By the way, I should point out that Raven is perhaps the only person on the entire show that knows the name of this match.
Pretty much, yeah.
He says that it is his destiny to be the NWA champion. Just wait about 27 months, pal. Suddenly, technical difficulties take over the asylum, and we get a power outage. We do hear somebody say, whoa, 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 and then the screen goes black. The audio goes out for over a minute. We get a screen on, we get a thing up by the pay-per-view company saying TNA will be right back. Like I said, it was the best thing that's happened on this show in a month. We come back, and Kevin Sullivan is shirtless in the ring.
Yeah, buddy.
And Kevin Sullivan was talking about pooping and then said he would be the observer for the main event when suddenly Raven fell down. Damn drug addict. Oh, wait. Sandman shoved him down and then walked away. Damn alcoholic.
I love the line that he says at the beginning of this promo. No one respects the flame quite like the fool who got burnt badly, who gets badly burned. I mean, that's a pretty damn good quote. I mean, some of Raven's promos can be quite meandering, but they also provide, interesting quotes that you could use in your everyday life. Spoiler alert, I am a big fan of Kevin Sullivan. I loved his work in Florida. I loved his work when he was feuding with Jimmy Garvin in Crockett. I don't know what the hell happened in 91. I haven't watched all those shows yet, but maybe a podcast idea for myself for a later date. And he says that he wants Raven to destroy Sandman. If he doesn't, then he'll destroy Raven. Now, Sullivan's been out of wrestling, out of active in-ring action since 99? Like, he had that blink if you miss it run with the Varsity Club, but that's it.
I mean, even that, I don't think he actually wrestled because he retired after the Benoit feud ended, and that was 97.
Yeah.
And I mean, like like, I don't know, because he did indies forever. I saw him on an indie once in like 2012. So it's like he may have done some sort of indie, but like he hasn't. This has not been a regular thing for him at this point, is wrestling. And I seriously doubt we're going to see him wrestling on this show, although I could be wrong. We'll see, I guess, next week, because what does this show do more than anything else? We give us random cameos. And this, at this point, like, I mean, I can't imagine anyone's actually paying $10 for it. But at this point, it's like, I think it's the only thing that's semi-perversely entertaining is seeing what random person is going to show up every week. Um, we then get Jerry Lynn versus Super Crazy with Conan. Crazy is Conan's representative this week to wrestle in. And to be fair, all these people that he's brought in are so much better than if Conan himself wrestled Jerry Lynn. I noted that Conan has brought in two-thirds of the Mexicools to wrestle Jerry Lynn, so maybe Psychosis is coming in next week. TNA puts over the crazy pinned Rhino to win the ECW TV title. And this is around the time Rhino returned to WWE after his neck surgery. So,
Mhm.
we'll call that something, I guess. So of all the Lynn versus Luchador matches we've had the last few weeks, this has been the best.
Yep,
Too bad Crazy. I think he's one and done here.
he is.
Crazy got in all spots, including the Diez. Easy for me to say, including the Diez Puñetazo de Doom Español, or in English, the 10 punches of Spanish Doom. The end of this match saw Lynn and Crazy wow, they probably kicked each other too, but they kicked out of each other's signatures moves. Conan hopped up on the apron. In spite of that, Lynn picked up the win by rolling through a Hurricanrana for the pin. After the match, Conan got in the ring and slapped Crazy for losing after a browbeating they left together. Like I said, this is probably one and done for Super Crazy. With that said, a fantastic little match, and if they'd gotten probably 5 more minutes, it could have been a match of the year candidate. Instead, it's just probably the best match we've had on this fucking show in over a month. 8.5 out of 10.
I gave it an 8 out of 10. I really love this match. Um, Very back and forth, which I love, and the crowd was hot. So was Tanay and West. I mean, if you just listen to their commentary, they were like, "God damn, this was fantastic." Uh, Tanay and West agreed that they want the Luchadors integrated into the X division.
Well, as we've noted now, pretty much every week for the last 35 weeks, this show is good when it starts with a good match. And it's like they know that's the case because if they didn't know that, we wouldn't be seeing good matches at the opener almost every week. It's those random ass weeks where they're like, oh, people don't care about wrestling, bro. Let's put on, David Flair versus Ron Killings as the opener or some shit, you know, because it's too much to just put on good wrestling matches. And
Mm-hmm.
that's part of my complaint too. It's like I spend 2 hours watching this fucking show, and on what's considered a good week for TNA, we get two good matches. Like that is what constitutes a good week for TNA was when we get two good matches out of seven. You know, I don't know the last good promo. I don't think we've had a good promo since that time Jeff Jarrett cut one as the go home show when he took on Ron Killings for the world title. I think that might have been the last good promo we've had on this goddamn show. We haven't had any good angles in forever. And yeah, so the only thing that this show could possibly give you is two good matches, and that is typically enough that it makes you think, wow, this is a good show. We had two good matches.
Yeah.
So we go to
Just
a
to
video.
clarify about the super crazy thing, I did look it up. It is one and done. The reason mainly being is he is contracted with New Japan and CMLL, and there is no way he was going to hop. He's going to do a triangle between Japan and Mexico and Nashville, and be sane or not as super crazy as he is. He'd be even super insane. So yeah. And 2 years later, he's in WWE.
So earlier this week, Vince Russo requested a meeting at his home in Atlanta with Mike Tenay. Russo, to make a very, very, very long story short, Russo is quitting wrestling effective immediately. Write this down. March 5th. If he's not back in 2 weeks, we'll call it a shock. Um, the whole point of this was that his kid made him think last week when his kid said that he's never home and yada, 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 and that he missed the birth of his daughter and he doesn't want to be like Kurt Hennig and die without seeing his kids grow up. And first of all, no one needed the Kurt Hennig reference, but second of all the people to name drop, Kurt Hennig, you know, probably had one of the easiest schedules in wrestling over the last decade plus, because in addition to just being injured for a decent part of it and being out of action, it's like, honestly, it's not the guy you would choose to say, oh yeah, he never saw his kids when like for the last decade he pretty much did all the time, you know.
Mm.
But anyway, Russo's quitting. We all believe that.
He also
Cindy.
said that even if this was work, he wished he wasn't. Um, I this promo was weird. Leave it at that. He probably just
Okay.
needs to shave or something, and he'll be fine.
New Church with Jim Mitchell versus the Hot Shots with Glenn Gilberti and Mike Sanders. So with Russo gone, who is in charge of SEX? Who cares? Well, apparently Glenn Gilberti, Mike Sanders, and Sonny Siaki do, because 30 seconds into the match, Siaki comes to the ring and takes Gilberti and Sanders to the back for a meeting. They show Ron Killing sitting in the crowd for the second week in a row. He was probably sitting in the freebie section. For some reason, Brian Lee, when seeing the Hot Shots double team his partner, got in the ring to distract the referee so the double team could be done. The Hot Shots nearly picked up the win using an international object, but the New Church quickly rebounded, picking up the win when Slash hit Chase Stevens with a missile dropkick while Chase was on Lee's shoulders. After the match, the Harrises confronted the Hot Shots outside of the Sex locker room and beat the shit out of Chase and Cassidy before throwing them out of the building. Nothing at all wrong with this match technically, and this was a loser leaves town match. Both Chase Stevens and Cassidy O'Reilly will be back, but in different roles. New Church wins 3.0 out of 10.
I gave it a 6. I actually thought the tag match was pretty good.
All right. Oh, by the way, speaking of angles that get started and don't get followed up on, remember last week when they were starting an ECW team with Sandman and Simon Diamond and Johnny Swinger? So much for that.
Yeah, that kind of gets rectified in a few weeks' time. But I want to say this. I find it interesting that you have the Hot Shots who got new gear. I mean, they no longer have those bland uh, attire that they had like last week. Like they got brand new gear to say that they're actually hot and on fire and something like that. And they're now gone. And can I also mention one thing that I've kind of enjoyed over the past 30 weeks or so? Can we big up Slash? Like,
Can we do
he's
what?
kind of been give Slash his due. I mean, he's been a really damn good hand out there.
Okay.
By the way, as for the Hot Shots, see you in a decade for a really awful tag team match with Wes Briscoe and Garrett Bischoff.
We will not be watching that far, ladies and gentlemen.
No, we're
We will
not.
not be watching that far.
No, that means we'd have to sit through Immortal, and I don't want to do that.
To another part of the building where neither Goldilocks nor Sandman knew the name of the match he was taking part in. To the front of the building where Mike Tenay introduced Jeff Jarrett, who came down the aisle and into the ring. Jarrett doesn't believe Russo has left the wrestling business. Don't worry, neither does anybody else. Jarrett then spends an unusually large amount of time talking about someone who has allegedly left the company. And then, because Jeff Jarrett can't just be in one shitty feud, he has to be in two. Out come Eric Watts, David Flair, and Brian Lawler. who come out and announce they're here to talk and not to fight. Yes, here on the show that's called Total Nonstop Action, we are here to talk, not to fight. Watts told him the reason they're mad is that Jarrett left out the three greatest second generation talents of all time. Now, I'm sure Jeff would have loved to have Bret Hart, Terry Funk, and Eddie Guerrero in the company, but that just wasn't possible. Apparently, he's talking about him, David Flair, and Brian Lawler. Anyway, Eric took offense to Jeff always having his back or something. He talks about, being signed to WCW after 3 weeks of training. And of course, the hilarious story is the reason why he was signed to WCW so quickly was because his dad, it was when Bill Watts was running the company. He talks about being PWI Rookie of the Year. And speaking of accolades that mean just as much, I once won a hot dog eating contest, getting me a $100 gift certificate to my local mall.
What did
Not
you use to buy
mentioned,
for that $100 gift certificate?
I no bloody idea. I think I just because they gave it to me in two $50 gift certificates, and once I realized that the first place just cashed it out with whatever my change was, I took the other one, bought a pack of gum, and took the remaining $49 and pocketed it as cash.
I think that was a pretty
Um,
damn good idea.
yes. Not mentioned, by the way, was that the last time Brian Lawler was here in TNA, he left the company because his girlfriend was sleeping with everyone, which caused him to steal Priscilla from Jorge Estrada. Anyway, this segment ends with Eric Watts daring Jeff Jarrett to hit him with a chair before leaving.
That was the reason? I would have expected more. Like if Jared actually slept with one of Watts' girlfriends when they were in the WWF or something like that.
Oh, that might be coming because, the guy who's not in wrestling anymore is still the guy in wrestling these days. So I'm sure some stupid reason is coming up sooner or later.
Yeah, the end of the show.
Jorge
Speaking of,
Estrada versus
yeah,
Disgraceland with Glenn Gilberti and Mike Sanders. By the way, despite not being an Elvis anymore and not having his Elvis gear, Jorge Estrada still uses the Flying Elvis theme, which remains one of the few things left in this company that are any good. 20 seconds into the match, Siaki comes back out and orders Gilberti and Sanders back to the back for another meeting. And to make a very long story short, Estrada picked up the win with a wacky, twisting neckbreaker. Yet another loser leaves town match. Not a single tear is shed. 1.0 out of 10.
actually, it's double. Both are gone after this match.
Who doesn't love a good winner and loser leaves town match?
Yeah, I gave it a 2 out of 10. It was fine. Um, Jorge would actually retire from wrestling by year's end, by the way.
The wrestling world did not miss him.
No. And oddly enough, TNA actually improves from here on out. So we get to the sex locker room, and it is chaotic. Sanders and Siaki are bickering about who's the boss, and then Gilberti breaks it up and introduces his new character developed, Hollywood. She has a shirt on that says, "Got Wood." I'll say this, at least it's a step up from Disgraceland. And I did
Her
some
gimmick, her gimmick is that she's pretty, and no offense, but she's really not that pretty.
I mean, there's Ohio hot and United States hot. Those two do not intersect at all. She
Okay.
actually was legitimately trained. She had a couple of matches, but she mainly did managerial stuff until she quit the business in 2007. Don't
Not a
worry.
sing not a single tear was lost or shed.
Don't worry. It's not going to matter too much at all. Interrogated segment, key cash, just fluff. Nothing worth noting at all.
By the way, Mortimer Plumtree ran into the locker room and got thrown out again. So That's our latest Mortimer Plumtree angle that's going to go nowhere.
I think he's
Uh,
done being on camera as well.
Also, some guy paid a lot of money to be a TNA dancer. At least the money went to charity.
At least the
To
costume
continue
was
the
decent.
production errors, audio bled over the Kid Cash interview. Um, and yeah, and then different songs were played at the same time, and announcers' audio was going in and out while previewing the Kid Cash Amazing Red match. At this point, TNA has become "Take your daughter to work and have her do your job" day. Um, and then we get our X Division title match, Kid Cash with Trinity versus Amazing Red. I'm starting to think I need to do research to find who was the last person to get a title shot after winning their most recent match. Um,
Sonny
I
Siaki, maybe?
Who knows? I think someone told Red to slow things down as he's not just doing 3,000 flips for the sake of doing 3,000 flips. Who knows? Maybe working in Japan all the time makes you a better worker. Who'd have thunk that?
Yeah.
Uh, Cash, did he throw a chair at Red's face spot? It's always great when the announcers yelled that the opponent didn't see that coming. When the last month, every time that spot has happened, Cash throws a chair, the guy catches it, throws his back at Cash, who catches it and throws it back in their face. So,
It's like
not
that.
sure how.
Have you ever played Ocarina of Time?
No idea what that is.
Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time?
Outside of you telling me it's Legend of Zelda, no idea what that game is. But so anyway,
It's
go
like
on.
the Ganon. Ganon throws a ball of light, and you have to fling it back at him with your Master Sword and hope you hit him. That's what that segment felt. That's what that sequence felt like. And sadly, Ganon got the hit in.
Okay then. All right. Um, so let's see here. By the way, Red hit a really cool looking superplex out the top rope for a 2 count. Cash hit a German suplex that sent Red ass over tea kettle for a 2 count. Red went for a dive outside the ring, but Trinity shoved Cash out of the way and took the bullet herself. One of these years, they are going to disqualify Kid Cash for all this blatant interference. By the way, remember, in this company, a disqualification means you lose the title, which doesn't really mean a whole lot when you never do disqualifications. At least not for like the next year, because I know they do. D'Lo Brown wins the tag team titles by disqualification and then loses them back the next week by disqualification. Spoiler alert for a year from now. Um, but Cash hits the moneymaker to pick up the win. I really like this match. I know, again, was not the best match you'll ever see, but again, on these shows, you embrace the good when you can. And I gave it an 8.0 out of 10.
Another 8 out of 10. This is. Might have to have a discussion on what was the better match on this show: Kid Cash versus Amazing Red, or Jerry Lynn versus Super Crazy.
Oh, definitely Jerry Lynn
Okay.
and Super Crazy. That's not even like, I know we didn't give it that, uh, big of a difference, but, it was still a better match.
Right.
AJ Styles, AJ Styles, one of the best 2 or 3 workers on the show, was on the show next. Was he having a match? Of course not. Why would you want AJ Styles to have a wrestling match on your wrestling show every week? Instead, he shoves Goldilocks into a wall because, man on woman violence. In case you're curious, in case you thought Vince Russo really left the company, we had some man on woman violence here, which is always fantastic. He storms into Jeff Jarrett's locker room demanding a rematch. So Jeff Jarrett called him a bitch and then treated him like a bitch and threw him out of the dressing room. And yeah, this is one of your 5 people who are challenging Jeff Jarrett for a world title match. And it gets worse from here on this show, which again is considered a good show.
By the way, I'd like to mention about AJ Styles. He actually did wrestle on this show.
Explosion doesn't count as wrestling on this show. If we don't see the match, it doesn't count.
I don't think the tapes also exist at this point either. I mean, you figure they have at least put up Explosion on TNA Plus.
I mean, yeah, I know I'm sure somebody on YouTube has it up, but if I'm not going to watch, if I'm barely watching these 2 hours a week, I am sure as hell not watching that extra hour a week. Another
By the way,
pre-taped
he beats
interview.
David
This
Young, so there goes the losing streak.
Yippee Melon Farmer. Another pre-taped interview. This one with America's Most Wanted, where they finally announced that next week is that elusive AMW Triple X match for what may or may not be the vacant tag team titles. Because last week they said Triple X were still the champions, but every other week they've said the titles were vacant. I tend to be on the side that the titles should not be vacant because it was a double pin, and in the event of a double pin, the champions retain the title. However, as we've also noted on this show, that it is one thing within TNA canon at this point that for some fucking reason, when there's a double pin in a title match, the title belt gets held up. Don't understand why, but hey, at least their dumb rules are consistent, and that's all we ever ask for. Harrison Storm said slightly more than nothing outside of they want to be the champions.
Makes sense.
America's Most Wanted versus Mike Sanders and Glenn Gilberti. Do you remember how I just said America's Most Wanted next week are going to get a match for the World Tag Team Championship of the world? So with that in mind, you would think, okay, they're wrestling the D team from SCX. So they're going to win because why would they lose to Mike Sanders and Glenn Gilberti, especially 1 week before their World Tag Team Championship match? And Cindy, who won this match?
Moondog Spot. Because he showed up for whatever reason.
You got lost for a second. What did you say?
Moondog Spot showed up for whatever reason. But Gilberti and
Spot.
Sanders won.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Moondog Spot did not win this match. Glenn Gilberti and Mike Sanders won.
But it makes sense because guess who interfered?
That still doesn't make sense because
it kind of does.
Week, no, it doesn't. Next week, Mike Sanders and Glenn Gilberti are not getting a tag team title match. The only reason it makes sense is if Mike Sanders and Glenn Gilberti next week are going to wrestle for the tag team titles, or it's a three-way, which it's not going to be. Or you do the gimmick where, okay, AMW lost this week, so now next week they have to wrestle twice. They have to wrestle once against Mike Sanders and Glenn Gilberti and get their win back, and then go on to take on Triple X later on that night, which I'm going to bet without looking at the results for next week, that's not going to happen either. It doesn't make sense. You don't have to have AMW lose this match. AMW could win this match, and then have Elix Skipper run down and hit them with a chair, hit them with the belt, or do whatever he's going to do. You don't, like, if this was real, if I was, this is a bad example because UFC just books fights anyway, but let's pretend that, this shit was real here. If the number one contender to a title loses a match, they don't get, their next match isn't for the title. Their next match, unless it's some, if the number one contender is fighting the champion and there's some wacky, screwy referee judges finish that, it's like, okay, you have to do a rematch because, he may have lost, but it doesn't really count because something got fucked up. In that case, like, other than that, the number one contender doesn't now get a title shot after they lose. The number one contender now has to fight somebody else in order to get his spot back. This is just, hey, bro, it makes sense, bro, for the number one contender to win. So, bro, just to make people, to swerve people, we're going to go the other way and have the other people win to make it unpredictable. Like, unpredictable is the dumbest fucking thing in wrestling. And people complain about this. It's like, oh, this is too predictable. The Elimination Chamber last night, until Cena kicked Cody in the dick, in the Elimination Chamber, it's too predictable. It's supposed to be. Booking is supposed to lead you to know what the outcome is going to be and for you to want to pay to see that outcome. This is, hey, AMW's lost this week. I don't know, but I'm going to bet they probably win the belts next week. I don't know this for a fact, but that's my guess at this point. And so what? So in 2 weeks, we're going to have them versus Gilberti and Sanders. Why? You could have just had them win here and like move on with our lives. It's like,
Plus, I've also kind of trained my brain to not really follow logic when it comes to TNA.
and
It's
if I
just
ever
a
reach
descent
up,
into madness.
I need to stop watching the good wrestling shows because watching the good wrestling shows with the good booking on them, makes me hate when I watch the bad wrestling show with the bad booking. And by the way, this is after I watched the David Von Erich Memorial episode of World Class, which features Fritz Von Erich using the death of his son to go on and on about his other sons winning the world title, which, you know, is a rant in itself that Trey and I are going to record later to talk about yesterday. I gave this match a 2.5 out of 10. You know, it is what it is.
I
We're
thought it was
back in
fine. I
this
gave it a 5.
I was waiting, by the way, for Sonny Siaki to come out 20 seconds into the match and take Sanders and Gilberti to the back. That would have gave it that would have been 5 stars if that would have been all the match was. But to the back, where to the SCX locker room, where Sonny Siaki is mad, so Mike Sanders hit him and beat him into the crowd. Siaki fought back, and they fought to the ringside area where you could see the crew setting up for the main event, because you couldn't just have the crew set up for the main event and Mike and Dawn talk about what's happening next week. By the way, what's happening next week, Cindy? No idea. Oh, I'm sorry, there's a tag team title match, but I don't know. I could have used the Don West screaming promo about next week's show.
We haven't had one of those in a while. I miss them.
By the way, even though nobody knew what the hell this match was, the crew somehow knew how to set up for this match.
I think Raven gave them, you know what? Put shit around the area, put shit around the ring area, tie them up, and we'll just go from there.
By the way, remember when we mentioned about, 10, 20 minutes ago that Hollywood debuted as the newest member of SCX? Well, Desire, who's also a member of SCX, gave her a rock bottom. And eventually all of SCX broke up all the fighting and they went to the back. Because again, we can't just let things breathe on this show, which, in case you have any doubt that Vince Russo is still involved in the booking, this really told you everything you needed to know right here. So then we get our main event. It is the Ravens Clockwork Orange House of Fun match with Kevin Sullivan as the referee. Raven versus the Sandman.
He's not the referee.
Whatever. He's the guy with stripes painted on his chest, and he called for the bell. Whatever you want to call him, he's the referee.
He's the observer.
Now, this match was included in the Raven DVD that TNA put out in 2006. And as we mentioned last week, my thought is if they were in an arena with a higher roof, this was going to be a scaffold match. And the funny thing is, I just watched a scaffold match at the fucking ECW arena in 1993. So if they could get a scaffold in there and the fairgrounds couldn't get a scaffold, that really tells you how small this building is. And the whole point of this match that they've been building up for at least 2 weeks is that this is some crazy match that Raven thought up in his mind, and who could ever picture such a thing? And it was not even a half-ass scalpel match, but basically it was a tables match with some weapons hanging up inside the ring. Is that really something that was in the deepest, darkest minds of Kevin Sullivan. Or not Kevin Sullivan, but of Raven.
No, if this was in the deepest, darkest recesses of Kevin Sullivan's mind, there
Well,
would be it'd be a lot better.
we would have had the triple Tower of Doom match, which would have been hilarious how they could have fit three cages on top of each other in this tiny ass arena here.
They'd have to move the show to
Um,
the Nashville Auditorium.
I was thinking Kevin Sullivan was really trying to become a TNA referee as he just ignored everything going on. Um, and other than that, this was every Raven Sandman match you've ever seen, just without the usual dog and pony show since Raven doesn't yet have a gang to run in. Sullivan openly hands each man weapons to use during the match. And of course, when you have a match, the whole point of it is you have to fight to the corner of the arena and knock somebody off off the perch. There's no near falls. Obviously there's not going to be any two counts. You can't like, and then the match kind of just ended because they didn't even really tease it much. I think they hit a fan at one point because they went into the crowd and they had like a little sign. I think it said Raven's Perch, Raven's Nest, or whatever. And I think a fan got hit with a pole there or some shit. Um, and they end up there, and Sandman falls about 2 feet through about 20 tables all stacked up on top of each other, giving Raven the decisive win. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, we're eventually getting Raven versus Jarrett for the world title. I still don't know how the hell it pops a buy rate at this point. I guess we still have 7 weeks to find out. But um, Raven's getting a world title shot. Sandman is not ever. And so, yeah, the right guy won here. But again, they didn't really tease anything. Raven beat him up to the stands and then Raven knocked him off. Like, whatever. So the right person won 3.5 out of 10. And oh yeah, not only did the right person win, we managed to have like almost every match on this show has managed to have no interference. So there's that, I guess. And this
The
was
only
one
one
of
that
them.
had
Hey,
interference was Skipper and AMW.
hey, somebody won this match, and then somebody lost this match, and then we moved on with our lives. And even though technically the next segment involves Raven, technically that was an entirely different segment. It was not a continuation of this match. So even though we've now gone what feels like 3 weeks with crappy main event matches since that Jarrett AJ match a few weeks ago, even with that, at least we're getting main event matches where we have a winner and a loser. And at least in this case, the winner of this match, theoretically, is moving on to something more important. I'm still waiting for Dusty Rhodes and Vader to move on to something more important, but that's never going to happen. So, but at least this time we're getting the winner of this match is going to move up the standings. It's almost like it almost feels like Vince Russo is mocking people by booking a show that, you know, has stuff that makes sense like this. And it's like he's doing it almost to mock wrestling fans by doing that without realizing that dumbass, this is the way it's supposed to be done. But it's okay because I guess tell us what you thought about this match before I dash any hopes about Raven being pushed as a serious threat.
I thought it was a brutal, violent affair that had its desired effect. Move Raven up the card. You see Raven and Sandman plunder each other pretty darn good. I thought it
Yes,
was fine.
it's important to note you did not watch, if you bought this pay-per-view for Raven versus the Sandman, you did not watch it because you thought it was going to be a 5-star wrestling match. So like the Dusty Rhodes Invader versus Harris match last week, if you bought this show for this match, you got exactly what you were going to get. Your expectations should have been met, and if they weren't, you have absurdly high expectations when you shouldn't.
So I give it a 5. just
Okay.
because of the spectacle.
And then any thought that, Raven got something out of this match immediately came to an end as Raven begins whining about wanting his title match.
He
And he
whined
moved.
like he was wanting to go to Mount Splashmore.
Yes. And even if we ignore that that's Raven's gimmick, that he whines a lot, up next sees Jeff Jarrett come out to confront the number one contender to his world title, or at least the most vocal contender to his world title. And much like how he's done for most of the last 6 weeks, Jeff Jarrett beats Raven's ass. He beats his ass with the belt. He beats his ass with various weapons in the ring. AJ Styles runs down with a chair. AJ swings at Jarrett, but Jeff Jarrett is too smart for this and ducks, so AJ hits Raven. AJ just left, beating up Raven. Down run David Flair and Brian Lawler, who Jeff Jarrett beat up as well. So again, to make the count here, this is now 4 people he's feuding with for the world title that he has outsmarted and or beaten up. And then he finally gets taken down by fucking Eric Watts. Now, if I were to take the 5 people that Jeff Jarrett is currently this week is feuding with over the world title, and I were to list who I'd want to see Jeff Jarrett defend the title against, Eric Watts is 4th. And that's
Would you
only
rather see
because
Brian Lawler?
I would much rather see Brian Lawler wrestle Jeff Jarrett.
Okay.
Because I at least know that'll be, it may not be, again, another 5-star match, but it'll be a perfectly acceptable, match. Give Jeff Jarrett and Brian Lawler 10 minutes. I guarantee, because they did it like motherfucker, that WWA pay-per-view in Las Vegas when Randy Savage was being promoted for it, and then Savage backed out at the last minute. They went with Jarrett versus Brian Lawler in a perfectly acceptable world title match, as long as you forget the fact that it was supposed to be Randy Savage. But yes, so Brian Lawler, I would rather see him wrestle Jeff Jarrett. I do not want to see David Flair wrestle Jeff Jarrett,
Nope.
and I am hoping beyond hope that that never happens. I'm hoping beyond hope that David Flair doesn't wrestle again, at least in this company. Although at this point, I'm assuming he does.
He does.
Yeah, sure. And hey, guess what? We finally got a reveal of what was in that stupid bag. Although I seriously doubt this is what was in the bag the whole fucking time, because David Flair pulls out a replica of the NWA World Title. And Mike Tenay, who apparently knows what every replica of the NWA title looks like, screams that he thinks that that's Ric Flair's replica of the world title. And that's when the show fades to black. Like I said, I sincerely doubt that that's what was in the sack the whole time, especially since the damn thing did not look that heavy every other time he's had it, and he kept smashing it off of steps and other metal objects that theoretically break a title belt. Like, I've got several replica title belts. If I took it and began smashing it off metal objects, I guarantee I'd break something on it. So anyway, that is it for this week's TNA. So match quality, a slightly higher than usual average rating of 4.42, because we only got that one awful match, and without any more Jorge Estrada, without any more Disgraceland, there is the chance that we may start upticking in match quality. But with that said, we'll probably get Bruce wrestling in a dress next week and midgets beating off in a trash can to make Dusty Rhodes happy. And probably get a renewed push of the Harris brothers next week or something. But at least for this week, we had, 2 good matches carried the show. Overall enjoyment, because this again shows you what happens when you get 2 good matches on a show, 5.5 out of 10, because most of the dumb shit was off this show. Notice I didn't say all of the dumb shit, because we can't ever have no dumb shit. That would make these shows too enjoyable. And future build. Now, future build, Cindy, you might recall last week, I went off on a rant, and I think the week before I went off on a rant, and I said future build 0 because no one on God's green earth wants to see Jeff Jarrett versus Vince Russo. Well, since we're not this week, we are not building up Jeff Jarrett versus Vince Russo, so I did not give future build a 0. I gave it a 0.1 because no one wants to see him wrestle Eric Watts or David Flair, but if you do, that's at least slightly more than watching him versus Vince Russo.
What about
So
Triple X versus America's Most Wanted?
that's not the main event world title program. Like at this point, like because like what we're supposed to be wanting to pay to watch these shows for are the world title situation, and right now the world title situation is Jeff Jarrett versus two guys I don't want to see in the ring ever again, and a third guy who has disappeared for probably 2 weeks. And so that gives us an overall rating, which again, on a good show, this is the overall rating, 3.34. Standards absurdly low when that equals the good show.
I give the whole show a 6.
You
Like,
probably like Harper, don't you?
no, it's just that. Well, let me explain myself and to the folks at home. This is, although I do catch up with WWE and AEW, I don't do podcasts on other shows. This is the only wrestling podcast that I do, mainly because it's the only free time that I usually have. And next week it's going to be for next week's show it's going to be very apparent because I'm going to be working 6 days straight. At least for that 6 days, $33 an hour. And plus, I've kind of turned my brain off while watching TNA. So going in that direction, I can enjoy myself. So I don't mind bad. What I mind is boring. And the show to me isn't boring. It might not be good, but it's serviceable.
Well, right now we're gonna see if that good crack that Trey and I apparently have been smoking to get our viewership numbers up expand to this show because for some weird reason last week's Smoky Mountain show and last week's bonus episode where we did live commentary on that Omni show WWE put out on the Vault YouTube page. For some reason, people were watching / listening to those shows. So my theory is that Trey and I were smoking a really good crack this week. So let's see if Cindy and I smoked a really good crack and pop
No.
the viewership number
No.
this week.
Stop that.
Alrighty.
I
So
don't smoke crack or anything like that bullshit. Stop that.
you don't want to be canceled along with us in like 10 years when people actually find these shows?
That's why I'm yelling about it right now.
Oh, Lord. By the way, what happened to the Rock and Roll Express? What happened to the Road Warriors? What happened to all those other random people who came in? What happened to Nikita Koloff? He's probably done.
Well, you'll find
But
about Nikita in a couple weeks' time.
oh, wonderful. But anyway, before we wrap things up, you want to plug anything or talk about anything else?
Yeah, I go thrift shopping every now and again, and I found a red Nintendo Wii for $10.
Interesting.
It works and everything. It's still got the GameCube compatibility and everything. I mean, I love it.
You didn't like hit yourself in the face with the remotes, did you?
No, it didn't come with remotes.
Aw.
Plus, I use a
How
wired
else
controller anyways.
how else can you use the Wii without those wacky wireless remote things?
Because I'm not an idiot. That's why.
Well, you're just putting down our audience by saying only the idiots who do that. Anywho, that's gonna do it for this week's show. Go out to support your local thrift store. Maybe you'll find a red Nintendo Wii out there for $9. And hey, come onto the show and tell us all about it. But that's gonna do it for this week's show. Thank you all for listening. Hope you all enjoyed the show and enjoy our descent into madness. And we will talk to you again in 7 days.
I'm gonna go have some meatloaf.
Delicious.